So hello to everybody from the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Wellness Campaign. I'm Jill Wilson, and wherever you are in the world today, welcome. The desire and the need for wellness is universal, and these webinars are not just for the 20,000 plus people working on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, they're for everyone. So please feel free to share any links far and wide. Today, I have great pleasure in introducing once again Anne Strether. Anne is a trainer with Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and South Lincolnshire Mind, our local mental health charity. She's a qualified teacher and has delivered training and managed and governed charities with a mental health focus in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough over the last 30 years. She's also worked in the fields of visual impairment and has also worked as a Samaritans volunteer and trainer. Now, please put any questions as you think of them in the Q&A, and Anne will attempt to answer some of them after the presentation. So with no further ado, I will hand over to her. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much indeed, and a very warm welcome from me also, and thank you for attending this session today. I'd like to just say a real thank you to Jill and to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus as well for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be here. And I hope today will be both interesting and also helpful as well. So without more ado, I'll look forward to sharing the screen and there we go, sharing the screen and beginning the session today. So thank you very much. So the session today is around managing mental health in a hybrid workplace, perhaps a new type of workplace that has come into place and settled since as a result of the pandemic. And so a very warm welcome. I'd like very much to introduce Cambridgeshire, Peterborough, South Lincolnshire Mind, as Jill said, just very briefly, and then looking at what we'll be covering today as well. So if I could just touch first of all on our organisation. So we work across the region and we do two things really. We help people care for their mental health and well-being, and that's around the session today, and then supporting them also on the road to recovery for people who are experiencing mental health challenges to live as they would wish. A key part is to campaign against the stigma and discrimination that is still felt. It is better perhaps, and the profile has raised of mental health, but if you are experiencing mental ill health, the stigma and discrimination is there. And we help by inviting people to talk about it. And so today again is very important. So we're an independent charity, part of a federation of mind networks, and fees we have from training goes directly to support people around their mental health. So just briefly, a few of the partners we work with and the work that we do. So we support people individually, either in crisis or as they're going forward with their mental health. And we hold a range of peer groups and support groups and workshops as well. And then, as we say, we campaign as well. So in terms of the session today, this is very much, as we noted, a taster session, and I'll just touch on that in a second. But what we're looking at today is just looking at the impact, the risk and the challenges of hybrid working and what hybrid working entails. And we hope that hybrid working can be a positive environment, but we also are looking to support our teams and support staff and ourselves where hybrid working can be a challenging environment and can lead to stress and ultimately to burnout as well. So we'll be looking at what the signs of those are so that we can help address them. And then really overall how to support your team in this hybrid environment and make it a very positive place. And then just touching on sources of support as well. Just a couple of points before we move forward. Firstly, this session, it's around the workplace environment and supporting teams, but it is very much around supporting people with their mental health. And sometimes when you step back for a moment in a very busy day and you're involved in a session on mental health, sometimes it can catch you unawares. And if you're feeling perhaps unexpectedly any sort of form of upset or distress around thinking about mental health, please do obviously take some time out, but please do get in touch with us at the end if that would be helpful. And we'll put an email address there and we'll be just delighted to hear from you. So please, you know, your own care is paramount. We mentioned that today is a taster session, and obviously thinking about a whole thing of caring for the mental health in teams is a very big issue. So just to say, I hope today will be interesting and just touch on some of the issues and some of the ways in which you can do this in a positive way. But we do offer a full day course as well that I'll just outline a little bit more at the end. And if you'd like to contact us at CPS or Mind, we'd be absolutely delighted to discuss offering the kind of wider, sort of fuller training session with you. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us to discuss that. So in terms of today, first of all, we're just going to set the context and just think about mental health and what it might entail. And I think this is a useful sort of definition because it's from the World Health Organization, so it's a real kind of credible, so it's their constitution. And what they're saying is that our health is a state of all of our physical, mental, social well-being. So it's the whole of whom we are as people, and it isn't just the absence of being ill or unwell or in distress. It's a holistic and very positive thing, and it enables us if our mental health is good and our well-being is positive, then we can realize our own abilities and cope with stresses of life, so we can work productively at work and make a contribution. So that was the World Health Organization, and a critical factor underneath that is that everyone has mental health. It's a part of whom we are, and we need to care for it, for ourselves and each other, but it is a very positive thing. So also in terms of setting the context today, is just thinking what hybrid working is, perhaps a new environment that we are now finding ourselves in. And one way of describing that is that a very flexible work model, or can be, but basically involves a blend of sort of in-office working, remote working, and then people who work on the go or in the community. And it can offer employees and their teams the autonomy to work sort of however you are most productive. So it can be a very positive thing, but can be a complex thing also. And a McKinsey report was saying that the majority of executives have seen notable improvements in individual productivity, diversity and inclusion as well, as a result of the hybrid working, because it can take account of people's circumstances and actually suit the workplace environment to the work it's needed. But again, I think it is very helpful to think about how we can best do that and how we can encourage and make that work for everyone. Again, just a bit of context again. So one survey was that 77% of employees here in the UK believe that hybrid working is the best way forward, and that may be a bit more universal than just the UK. So that it can be such a positive environment and provide these opportunities, but also that perhaps over 2/3 of companies don't actually have a plan in place for their hybrid working, and it's more as it works out, or perhaps ad hoc. And just as the remote part of hybrid working is that half of employees have said in a survey that they feel more burnt out from working remotely for reasons that I think we're probably familiar with, but we'll touch on today. So yes, it can be very positive, but it can be a challenging environment, and people may need support in working remotely in a way that is good for them. So just to have a look here at perhaps the changing sort of landscape really with the emergence of hybrid working, and there's a few sort of surveys that may reflect that. So just going clockwise, so 60% of Generation Z, that's loosely people up to their mid-20s, said that mental health support was a key factor when choosing an employer, which is maybe perhaps quite an interesting development. Again, nearly 2/3. Whereas 68% of millennials, so that's people essentially under the age of 40, and then far higher of the generation up to the mid-20s have left their roles for mental health reasons and have realised that stress at work was making them unwell, and they left their roles. Just as an additional point, that a toxic work culture was more likely to be a factor in leading to high staff turnover than pay rates, that people, even if their pay wasn't perhaps as high as they would hope, if they felt their mental health was being cared for, then they were more likely to stay. And then finally, bottom left, was that 85% of the ONS statistic of working adults wanted a hybrid approach to working from home and the office, felt that it suited their work-life balance and also their productivity, but that would present new challenges to workplace well-being. So again, this underlining the importance of considering mental health, and again, that hybrid working can be positive if people's mental health is taken into account. So here we just look at some of the impact and the challenges of hybrid working, and then we can look at how to support it. So the impact of hybrid working. So just looking at the remote side of it, that there can be the difficulties that I'm sure you all recognise. Back-to-back meetings when you're on screen on a laptop can be actually extremely tiring and have quite a difficult impact on oneself physically and mentally. Too much screen time, again, very tiring actually, and maybe not good for your eyes, your posture. And we know that it can be more tiring being on the screen than face-to-face, just from the lack of movement, and also perhaps not being able to rely on body language. It's so you have to kind of put yourself out more in the sort of talking, and there just aren't that nuances of interaction. Can be lack of breaks if meetings go back to back, whereas actually if you're in the office there would be a natural break there. And it is not difficult to work longer hours, to start a bit earlier, to carry on working a bit later. There's also clearly the lack of commuting and time, and actually it's very healthy to go out in the house in the morning. It supports the sleep-wake cycle and it gets one moving, exposure to sunlight, and it's a time to the transition period between between home and work. And clearly, sorry, coming back the other way, indeed, that's the same thing. It puts an end to the working day, we hope, but at least an end to the working day in the office environment. And then again, the processing time that the brain needs, that we need, to actually transition from work towards home, and then be able to focus on home when we arrive, rather than suddenly being in it without that time. And just a general lack of structure and support around remote working. Just that isn't that sort of structure and support of a natural kind of working day. And again, of course, we know around that disconnection and from others in the team, and isolation and loneliness. And I just want to touch on this one, because I think the question about hybrid working is that some people, by dint of geography, where they live, of ease of transport, can come into the office fairly often, perhaps, whereas others, that isn't a possibility. And I think that can set up a real sort of difference between some members of the team who are around the office culture, the office environment. They come across people in different levels of the organisation, spend time with the senior teams and so forth. And they just have that, they just get to know each other and others within the organisation. Whereas others within the same team can work maybe much more remotely, and that can set up a real disconnection between the two, and can compound really and highlight the isolation and potential loneliness of those who aren't able to come into the office quite so often. So I think that's where hybrid working can be even more unhelpful in that sense. And indeed, the same follows in maintaining those working relationships, and that we need to work quite hard to make sure that those were there, and to make sure that they're even ones, and that those people who can't come into the office so often have the same strength of working relationships as those who spend time just being and working together. And not only sort of being around and knowing each other more deeply as people, but can share ideas at work and can bounce ideas off each other and gain from each other in that sense also. So those are challenges perhaps for people individually, although clearly for the manager to address those. But then let's just look more closely at what the challenges might be for a manager. And when we've done that, then we'll look on to the question of stress and what we're dealing with. But coming back to the challenges for a manager in that sense. So firstly, if people are working remotely, we just know that there just are those chats when you can address small issues that arise, do it in sort of in person, to do it warmly, together face to face. And the small things that just come up, they can just be addressed in a very low key, warm kind of way. Whereas actually, if you're working remotely, then perhaps you have to put those in an email and suddenly it's a little bit more of an issue. You don't know how it's landed as a manager. And that lack of getting to know each other and those small work chats is very difficult. Facilitating hybrid meetings, and perhaps we've all had part of those, but they can be difficult when we're in a situation where some people are in the room and some people are working remotely. And with the best will in the world, it is actually very hard to make sure that the people who are working remotely feel as much part of the group as those in the room, because just again, the body language, if you're in the same room, it's the glances, it's the odd little comments that that separate out the two. And if people are getting very involved in what they're talking about, it can be difficult to remember always to make sure that the people who are working remotely feel part of that meeting. So they are quite difficult to facilitate and ensure that those people working remotely feel as much part of that meeting. And indeed, around keeping staff engaged and motivated if they are the more remote elements of a hybrid team as well. So making sure that people do feel kind of part of it and are as inspired to take part takes real awareness, I think, and energy. It can be difficult to plan team activities, and clearly the options of perhaps just meeting for a drink after work or making sure that you have lunch together, even those sorts of things that are really important for enabling people to get to know and care for each other, are just more challenging to do and may involve some generosity from everyone. Integrating new starters is hard remotely, and we may well all have needed to do that during lockdown. But I think if the new people who start are the more remote part of a team, then that can be, even sort of more difficult, and it takes a really careful sort of induction to make sure that they are feeling very much part of the team. And in a sense, managing people's working preferences can be such a positive thing, because you're enabling people to manage home and work, but it does involve quite a bit of trust and careful management as well. And just overall, picking up on changes in behaviour can be difficult if people are remote. And as we say, balancing the team dynamics of working remotely, working in the office. So I'd just like to just come to talk briefly about the stress in the workplace, and then we can look at how very positively to address that. So this is the stress that may be felt sort of generically if people are working in any aspect of hybrid working, but in a sense is the bottom line of where people may be experiencing difficulties, and how as managers we need to be aware of the stress that people are experiencing. Just thinking back to the figures before, where people have left jobs due to stress, to make sure we can address stress that people may be experiencing and make sure that they feel supported. So stress itself is the body's natural physical and emotional reaction to feeling overwhelmed or a threat, and it can be designed to be a very positive thing. Puts you on alert, it enables your body to have energy, to be alert, and to address challenges that may come your way, and to rise to the occasion. So they can occur firstly when we feel overwhelmed, when you wake up in the morning, you don't know how you're going to get through the day, and are unable to cope with the pressure of all the different things sort of on your shoulders. And they can also occur when we're feeling threatened. And that can be a real threat, which originally there's a tiger outside, you need to fight a fierce animal, and it could be physical danger now if somebody cuts you up on the road, but also a perceived threat as well. Our body doesn't spot the difference. So if you, for example, are speaking at an important meeting and you're feeling very stressed, then all the signs and symptoms of stress, increased heart rate, sort of more shallow breathing, the blood's going to the major muscle groups, so our hands feel cold and a bit sweaty. We're producing hormones to address it, sort of adrenaline, cortisol, so we may feel a bit sick and so forth, are all there if we've got a difficult meeting, as well as if there's a physical danger. But of course, everyone's tolerance to stress is very different, and ours changes too, depending on how resilient we're able to feel at any one day. So stress itself is not a diagnosable mental health problem. A GP might sign you off from stress, but it's not actually a diagnosis of mental illness. However, the body is designed, when the challenge has passed, the threat has passed, for the body then to have a chance to reset and to sort of come out of the symptoms and to relax and reset. But if one is experiencing prolonged stress, that can lead to anxiety and depression. And of course, those are diagnosable mental illnesses, because the apart from all those symptoms not being healthy to keep continuing those, cortisol, for example, can lead to changes in the brain as well, which can lead to depression. So we need to make sure that we do the stress we feel to rise to occasions, that actually those we can then reset ourselves afterwards, and that our staff can do that they're not stressed all the time. And I think this is quite an interesting curve of showing how stress can affect people at work, and sometimes unexpected, we're not aware of it, or we may be not aware in our staff of how they're feeling. So along the vertical axis is performance from low to high, and along the horizontal axis is the level of pressure that people may be feeling. So just to go through these, and perhaps as we do, you might like to kind of just note where you might be, or you have been, or where your staff team are. So I think it's quite interesting to think about as a sort of benchmark of where people are. So if the level of pressure is very low, we may actually just be bored, we're not being stretched, work's very repetitive, and our performance may be low. Then as we move across to the right, we get to the comfort zone, where the challenges of work have increased, and we're able to do them well. It fits in with our ability to matches our skills and abilities. It's interesting. We're able to carry out the work well, and our performance is good too. So this is a very stable place to be, and actually a very kind of positive one. If the level of pressure increases further, then we may be stretched. We can rise to the occasion. Our bodies can have stress in a positive way. We can deliver to the deadlines. We are being very proactive, energetic, we're getting work done. And our optimum performance can be across this stretch zone. And our level of performance is high, and we're really delivering, very productive. However, if that stretch zone continues, then, as we say, our bodies need time to reset. And if they're not given that, then we can move up to the strain zone, and particularly if level of the pressure is increasing further. And that is the point at which we can then get tired, because we can't keep going at that pace. And it can also mean that our judgment isn't so good, our decision making isn't as clear. And finally, if pressure increases further, then we can go towards what we're thinking of as burnout, and we can be really quite exhausted, and some quite underlying health problems, physically and mentally sometimes, because they're obviously very interlinked. So I think it is very interesting, and as managers we need to be careful that our those we work with perhaps move between the stretch and the comfort zones, so that as a kind of general sense, we're working well within our skills and our abilities are being used, but we're within the way in which we can work, you know, at a steady rate, with times when we are stretched, can do our optimum performance, and then move back to the comfort zone. So we move between the two. So that's stress and pressure. Now, what I wanted, I'd be really pleased if you just sort of help me here, that if I just come out of the slides for a second, just thinking about your colleagues, what might you notice if you or one of your team are feeling feeling stressed? So if we just stop sharing for a second and then come into the chat. There we go. Are you happy just to add into the chat here, what are the signs that your staff are feeling, maybe feeling stressed? So thank you very much. Yes, staff become quiet and withdrawn, very much so. Yes, that's good. Disengaged, yes. The change in behaviour, attitudes, absolutely, from how you know them to be. And people are short-tempered and irritable, and indeed tearful, all of those things as they're sort of trying to deal with what they have. And they act out of character, very much so. We aren't acting how we want to be. Short-tempered and indeed repeated illness, because stress does have an impact on our physical bodies as well. People may, you know, very tired, headachy, and other weak points that come through, very much so. Yeah, absolutely. People are quiet and short-tempered when they wouldn't normally be, very much so. Yes, and very much translated into levels of absence. They become withdrawn and make mistakes. We're saying that our judgment's affected and change from how you expect them to be, just our concentration falls. People are scattered and confused, very much so, because if there's so much pressure, you don't know where to start sometimes as well. Lovely. No, that's absolutely lovely. I mean, totally, in the sense of you're really helpful, your thoughts. And I think, you know, the question of being sort of irritable and so on is a very clear one, because we're trying to kind of focus on all the things we need to get hold of. So thank you very much indeed. What we'll do is we'll come out of the chat and then come back to the slides. Lovely. So all the things you suggested about if your team member is feeling stressed are absolutely correct. And here's just a recap of them. There might be some physical things as well, in the sense that people may switch cameras off during meetings, and that's again part of not engaging, as you said, as much during calls and meetings, and maybe avoiding office interaction, and that hybrid workplace where people may be either at home, the potential to be either at home or in the office, or out and about. People may choose to avoid the office interaction, just becoming less productive, as you said. And as you're saying, showing more irritability. Our minds, when they're stressed, wants to focus on what the stress is. We become irritable with things that distract us from that. Overworking, and the hybrid model unfortunately allows people very easily to overwork and not be able to switch off, just kind of check their emails in the evenings, so on and so forth. And all of this, not having that break, means that we all can get very tired, lethargic. And we're saying if you're moving into the sort of strain burnout, it's difficult to make decisions, as you noted. And again, as you put in the chat, showing out of character behaviour. People's work suffers a bit, have emotional outbursts, arguments perhaps, and increased sickness and absence as well. Absolutely. So thank you very much indeed. What I want to do now is to move on to so how can we support our staff, support our teams in this hybrid environment, and ensure that they're not experiencing the stress that you identified and the symptoms that came out of that illustrate and indicate their stress. So thinking about a couple of things here, really. First of all, things that you might be able to, as a manager, sort of support your team with particularly, and then also leading by example, which is really important. So let's touch first on the things that we can do, and if we can just talk through these a little bit, that would be really helpful. So just keeping an eye on your team's schedules through Outlook or whatever we use, and just being aware of the workload that people have, the meetings that they have, and trying to work with people. And then when slotting in meetings and so forth, just really being sure about, if at all possible, not booking back-to-back meetings, or at least allowing people time to have a break between them. You know, an hour is really enough to be on a video call without a break, but actually making sure that in people's schedules that they also have some focus time as well, or admin time to get on top of things and think about stuff, and also to take a lunch break every day, and then also making sure that you do the same, and really talking through with people about the importance of having that lunch break every day, and if they're working at home, ideally getting outside, albeit briefly. And being open and honest overall, and it's being able to not just to say these things are okay, but sort of modeling it too, and also just being very kind of open, I think, about the stresses and the difficulties and challenges of hybrid working that we've just looked at, and actually admitting those and talking about them, and showing that you take them seriously, and are doing things yourself to ensure that you care for your mental health, and making sure that your team have the opportunities to make sure that they care for theirs too, in terms of a working pattern, their working day. And then talking regularly to all your team members, and that's those you may be in the office with, but even more so those who are working remotely, whether at home or out and about, and then making sure there's time to talk about what they do outside work, talk about their well-being, and schedule regular check-ins. So, you know, those one-to-one sessions are vitally important, and as part of those, to talk about people's well-being and get to know themselves as people as well. So for those people who aren't in the office, even more important to get to know them as people, and what's in their lives, as much as people want to talk about them, and how that may be affecting them at work. And then encourage the social and wellbeing activities that might in a very small way have just been natural part of work before. So taking time to connect as a team, and in person or virtually. So times when everyone is virtual or everyone is in person. And if it's just not possible in person, then to have some activities or social activities, whatever works well for your team and whatever the team chooses, but somewhere everybody is on the same sort of platform, as it were, and just creating clear expectations there of, you know, making sure that absolutely, in terms of people's sort of well-being time, the lunch breaks and so forth, and the support available in terms of one-to-one, that all those are very clear processes, and really just sort of thinking about so much having the team sort of guidelines and processes in place, and being very explicit that it's really important that they reflect people's health and well-being, and that they must take responsibility for their own health and well-being. And then just leading by example, and in order for people to feel really confident about caring for their well-being in different environments, that everyone clearly looks to your manager to see what the expectations are of how to be, and there's nothing more powerful than leading by example in that way. So as a manager, you need to model your own self-care and well-being, and whether remotely or in the office, to take a lunch break every day, whatever, half an hour, whatever it is, and make sure that that's in your calendar, and at the end of sort of meetings and sort of days, that is sort of mentioned, and right, everybody out now, you need to take your lunch break, go outside. And also that as a manager, you use all your annual leave as well, and make sure that your team do too. And creating strong work and home boundaries for yourself, and respecting those of other people. So and there's so many ways you can do that. Obviously emails out of hours as well, and as a manager, if you need to send emails out of hours that they don't appear in people's inboxes until 9 o'clock the following morning, however that works. That if you're in the office, that you go home at the set time that you can as much as possible, and you expect everybody else to go home too, and that actually just in terms of beginning and end of day, again, if people are working remotely, that you respect those as well. And then again, talking about that and talking about those boundaries in team meetings, and talking about ways that people might want to carry them out. There's that thing about setting the time, closing your laptop very firmly, saying that's it, leaving it aside, not checking emails in the evening as well, and talking about those things and making sure that people don't do them. And then we touched on this, but balancing your own schedules in your own calendar, having focused time as much as if you can, and avoid the meetings that just go back to back as much as possible. So again, and when you are coming together as a team and booking time, being very clear and respecting that. And then if it's possible to vary remote and face-to-face working and meetings as well, if that is possible. And I think a really lovely thing, if you can, is to have people's one-to-one, so regular one-to-one meetings. And if you can have those face-to-face, that's just fantastic and makes an absolute world of difference. And if the beginning of one-to-ones, the one-to-ones are around checking how people are, how their mental health is, asking them to rate it 1 to 10, and you kind of keep a note, and making sure that that's one thing you discuss, how people's well-being is and how they're feeling, and whether they're stressed, so that your staff know that that's something you're very aware of and very important to them. And if it's possible to have some team meetings face-to-face as well, maybe 1 a quarter or whatever it is in the different locations that you work, that makes a world of difference as well. And if you can then share lunch or together in that time, that's really powerful too. So that obviously is just something that varies enormously from team to team. But if there are some of these meetings, again, if it's team meetings where maybe if people naturally come into the office, where everyone can be remote sometimes, so that it's not always the difference between those in the office and those not in the office, I think that's really important. And overall, creating an open work environment, so encouraging people to share. And actually, if people are working remotely, then encouraging them and making it happen for them to be able to come into the office sometimes, and encouraging people to meet within the team, to meet occasionally face-to-face as well. So just making it sort of aware that you believe that to be important is lovely. But actually, it's around the conversations, and having the health and care for your staff as a very key shared goal is a very powerful thing, and will make people understand, and making it easy for people to talk about the times when they are feeling stressed and what makes them feel that is the case, and talking about the hybrid environment and enabling people to share how they find that, I think is really important. And finally, allowing others to see your own vulnerability and the challenges that you feel. What I would like to do is just to touch here on a wellness action plan. So this is a guide. You can see it in Mind have it on their website, National Mind have it on their website. And it's a really lovely sort of wellbeing plan that you can use with your staff and your teams in their one-to-ones. And it's quite a lot in there, but it's very accessible. And it covers a number of issues. So first of all, it talks about mental health and definitions, and what we mean by the different terms that we talk about, sort of mental health and well-being and so on. And then, as it says here, then it goes on to how to use this plan and how you can use it successfully, how you can use it well in your one-to-ones. Then it talks about just staying well overall, caring for your own well-being, and there's so much in there and so much we can talk with you about. Then it goes on to look at identifying work patterns and how, in terms of hybrid working, are you working at home? Are you working out on the go? Are you working in the office? And this plan indeed goes on inside to say that it is a guide around hybrid working. And then having identified that, the sort of two main points is firstly how to stay mentally healthy at work, and things that can help you, and if your well-being is good, how you can make sure that that continues and that you can manage that and see it as a priority. And then the next section in it is if you feel that your mental health isn't where you would like it to be, where you're feeling stressed, and we talked about the curve, moving into the strain zone, not being able to relax after stressful situations, and what can you, your manager and your colleagues put in place to enable you to address that stress and to support you. So if there's poor mental health at work, how can you make sure that your team are able to address that stress and make things better, rather than feeling they might need to leave? And finally, I just wanted to touch on some support services here. There's some offered by CPS Unwind. If you go to our website, you'll see those. And we have a range of good mood cafes, we have peer support groups, a range of things that might be helpful for you or your team. Then if people are moving into difficult circumstances, the Samaritans, Jill says I was a Samaritan, and they're just there to listen, help you process your thoughts, whatever your mental health situation is. GP may not be that easy, but the social prescribers are important people now in supporting people in accessing community services. But then obviously any suicide concerns, mental health crises, you can call 99 in general terms, go to A&E. In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, there are particular services. So in a crisis, the first place to call is 111 and option 2, and then someone will be there to talk through your crisis situation. We care for people in people may be referred to us at night at our sanctuary. We're there in person for the first half of the night if people are referred. You can self-refer to the NHS for therapies. And then I just want to finally touch on how are you Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. There's this lovely service, it's kept completely up to date, and it is full of all sorts of activities in all the locations across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, if that's where you happen to be and happen to work, of things in the community to support your mental health and well-being. So finally, I just wanted to say a couple of things before we move on to the Q&A answer sessions. If that can, if I can help in any way, I'll be delighted to. So just to say, in the talk, we looked at a hybrid environment, people in the office, people at home, people working out and about. And it seems that there is so much to benefit from that, so much in terms of productivity, effectiveness, and it can be such a positive thing, but it can also lead to difficult, stressful situations. So what we're about as managers is making sure that we can make that hybrid environment work well for our staff. And there are so many ways that we can do that. By being aware, by knowing what we need to do, and by leading, for example, and modelling our own self-care as well. So that was just a very brief taster session, but I would like to say that we run a full-day course on managing mental health of our teams in a hybrid environment, and we would be absolutely delighted to hear from you, and I'll put my address in the chat box in just a second if you'd be interested in talking to us around that. And then we talk around as well around making reasonable adjustments, for example, within that, where mental health is a protective factor and what's the definition of that, and what to take into account with reasonable adjustments. We look at different scenarios and just go into infinitely more depth of all the things that we touched on today. So as I say, please do you know, get in touch if you would like to if you'd like to talk about that, taking up that session. That would be great. What I'd also like to just come back to at the end, if I may, is that that we've got a QR code and our evaluation. I'm so sorry, the link, I just realized that the link isn't there, so I need to find that for you. But and maybe that Jill can send that out. But if you've got a phone and can use the QR code just to do a small evaluation, we'd enormously appreciate it. So thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to that. So thank you so much. What I'll do now is just talk with Jill around the Q&A, and before we finish, I'll put the address in the chat as well. Just put that there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. That was fascinating. Lots and lots of really good information there. That link that you're currently putting in the chat section, I will also send out to everybody whose email addresses I have. Thank you, Anne. Oh, so that's quite straightforward, training@cpslmind.org.uk. But we'll put that in the email that we're going to send out to everybody with the recording of this session. We did have a question earlier, Anne, about the slides. Is it possible to have a PDF version of the slides?
Of course it is, absolutely. I'll be delighted to send you that, Jill, just after the session.
That's great. And what we'll also do, if I think Anne will send me the link that we saw on the action plan, so that we can all download the action plan ourselves. Yes, we've got somebody saying, please could we send slides to me too. We'll send the slides to everybody. We'll send you the link to the action plan and the support services that Anne referred to just before the end. So there will be a lot of information coming out along with the link to the recording, which will be up on YouTube. Now, if anyone has any questions, can you pop those in the Q&A for us? It might have been, of course, that either we're just too amazed at how great that was and we don't have any questions, or it might just be that you're a little bit shy in coming forward. So if you do have any questions, it's totally anonymous. We won't give your name, and we can answer anything that has brought up for you. As Anne says, they've got a full day course for this managing mental health in the hybrid workplace, and it's going to be very, very worthwhile, I think, to maybe mention that to your companies and see if you can get funding for it. But if we do have one question come in.
Yeah, no, that's a really, I'm so sorry. Yes, I've just looked at it, Jill. Thank you very much.
So the question is, what is a social prescriber?
That's lovely, and that's a really great question, and I'd be actually delighted to answer that. So thank you very much. So there is a service now which, by and large, is referral through a GP. But someone who is a social prescriber who will be who can work with you individually and help you sort of access community support, but in a very supportive way. So we'll work with whatever your kind of needs might be, but in a supportive way, and go along with you to whatever it might be, services, support in the community, and just support you within that. So it may be around physical activity, it might be mental health, whatever it may be, but that they are incredibly sort of passionate and very supportive and amazing people who work with GP practices and support people with their mental and physical health. Yes. So I just think
lovely. It doesn't look at the moment as if we have any more questions. I think it's been very thorough, Anne. Oh, we do have another one here. Let me just read that out so everybody knows what's happening. Oh, it's coming, I think, maybe via the chat. Do you think there's such a thing as the ideal ratio working from home to working in the office in a full week, full time? That's a fascinating question.
That is such an interesting question. Of course, the easy answer is it just varies enormously depending on what your work is and all the circumstances around it. But I suppose perhaps what is also an interesting answer to that is that having work at home enables you to have quiet time around reports and that kind of work, whereas actually working with others, it enables you to share ideas, bounce ideas, get to know people, all the benefits. So it's whatever is the balance really that feels right for you and for your organization. And I think it's something to discuss within the team as well, very valuably, so how that can work best. So thank you. It is just the balance that just feels right, I think. I hope that's all right.
Yeah,
And
we've got a comment coming in here. I've set up 2 days a week in the office for full-time employees and 1 day in the office for part-time employees and the rest from home. And I have to say, within CBC and CUHP, we do exactly the same. We tend to have 2 days in the office when most people, and it doesn't always work out, but most people can come in, because then, Anne, we're actually looking at the social interaction that you were referring to. And that's we're finding that invaluable, and for us that feels like the correct ratio, but it does depend on your team, the age of your team, and how engaged your team is. I've got a question here. Any tips on how to encourage staff to actually come into the office, whereas they prefer to remain at home? And I find that an interesting question, because I like working from home, but I also like coming into the office and actually seeing everybody.
I think that's right. I think it's possible sometimes to have expectations that, you know, if it's for a one-to-one or team meetings, perhaps. So there might just be, depending on what works, expectations. So those are kind of laid down in a sense, if possible. And then, but I think also if people are reluctant, then that's something perhaps to discuss in their one-to-ones about all the benefits of spending time with the team, and to talk to people about why they prefer to work at home and how, you know, is it a necessity in terms of other commitments, or is it just that they, you know, like just getting on with their own work, but actually engaging with staff about during one-to-ones about why that might be the case.
It's very easy, isn't it, to get out of the habit of coming into work and getting into the habit of not quite staying in your pajamas, but not having that structure. And actually what I find is on the days when I do come in, that gives me really good structure. And on the days when I don't, I tend actually to get more done, and I tend to probably work longer hours, but then I get the feeling of accomplishment. So I think it's really good to get the balance right. It's all about the balance, and maybe as managers to have a firm expectation of when your staff will come in, rather than leaving it totally flexible, saying, well, I do need to see you 2 days a week. On the whole, obviously that doesn't always work, but maybe that's the best way of addressing it.
I think that just sounds absolutely excellent, Jill. Thank you very much. So I'm just conscious there's been a question in the question and answer.
We've got the chat open. Let's open that. Right, let's have a look. I don't work, this is not me speaking, I don't work at the CBC, and at my workplace hybrid working has become very contentious. I prefer to work from home and only go in when it's necessary, which might only be once a week, but I'm under a lot of pressure to go in more. This pressure makes feelings of isolation worse, and it's hard to express any of the stresses of working from home, as I would probably be told that this was my own choice.
Thank you very much for, you know, for sharing it's a very sort of honest question that may well reflect what many people are feeling. So thank you for such a helpful question.
It sounds really as if what this person is saying is that they want to work from home, but as a result, they have these feelings of isolation. However, they would be told it was their own choice if they did talk about it. And as we know, it's really invaluable to be able to talk about our feelings, but it sounds as if they're reticent to actually say to anyone in their company, oh, this is how I feel, because they're just going to be told, well, it's easy enough to solve, just come in then. And it sounds as if there's a little more to this than meets the eye, maybe.
I think that's right. By the way, I'm so sorry. I just realized the sun was coming in quite dramatically, so I'm sorry about that. I think so, very difficult. And in a sense, this is why just one-to-ones, you know, and are so helpful and so important as managers, you know, to have these one-to-ones when you can address these things, because if you're not able to address them, it's so hard, and often you really can resolve things by talking them through with an empathetic manager.
But maybe all managers are not empathetic, and maybe this is what this person is referring to. They would probably be told it was their own choice, and maybe therefore you go to an outside form of support, be it a friend, a colleague, be it Samaritans, just somewhere to offload and be able to talk this through, because we all know the value of talking and being able to talk and just getting something off your chest. We've got one coming here on the chat. Are there any team events you can suggest to encourage people to come into the office? Now, what we do at CUHP and CBC Limited, we have a quiz. Every month we have a quiz. Whoever wins the quiz is responsible for doing the quiz the next month. So I'm very happy to be bobbing along on the bottom and never winning, because it means I don't have to create the quiz. We tend to have fun doing the quiz. So one of our team meetings every month is a social event of whatever type, and it may well be quiz. Sometimes it's exactly as you suggested, Anne, having lunch together.
Very much so. And actually, exactly, you can have the remote kind of events as well, and also in the office as well. But and actually, I mean, the quizzes are brilliant, but also just asking the team what they suggest, with what they'd like, and then, because some people like some things and some other things, and then you can kind of choose, you can vary them so that they suit some people rather than others. So yeah, it's a lovely discussion actually to have within the team, and people feel that they like to be asked. So
and we've got a question here. Is that a quiz in the office? Yes, we tend to all get together, but we don't manage to all be in. So we do it. We have a hybrid meeting and a hybrid quiz. So it's shared on PowerPoint. It is. We are all honest in our scoring. Because nobody double checks, because it's just a game at the end of the day. But it's quite fun. People who are working from home on that day who can't get in can still take part, and it is fun. We've got here, we have twice weekly protected 20 to 30 minutes for social chat, be it home, in person, or a mixture of both. That's a great idea.
It's a lovely one, absolutely. And also just to encourage staff, I think, to talk to each other, and that's not a waste of work time if you're just encouraging people to spend time together, because actually building up those work relationships is so important for productivity, if nothing else, as well. So I think that's absolutely lovely, really good. Jill, I wonder, would you just mind if I share the screen and put that link back in as well? Is that, may I just do that, put the evaluation link?
Of course, yes. While you're doing that, I'm just going to read out a comment we've got here. Hybrid working has led in some cases to hot desk. I've just lost it because you're sharing.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, when we stop sharing.
There we go.
No, hybrid working has led in some cases to hot desk environments, which is exactly what's happened to us, which have unacknowledged negative impacts on some people. I'm assuming you're talking about the feeling that people have their own protected space, and suddenly when you're hot desking, you don't. Is that what you would agree with, Anne, there?
I think so, and it is a difficult one, and it is just the reality as well, which is really, really hard. You have often the office is quite empty, and then suddenly you'll have days as well where everybody needs to come in, and then there's nowhere to sit, and that's really difficult.
We do have an office planner on Google Sheets, so we all have to book our desk, which most people don't do, and then we all suddenly come in and find we haven't got a desk. But you know, that sort of system can work.
Definitely. And again, just coming back to the same thing, I know, but if actually you're able to talk about this, then you can often come to a practical solution so that those who come in rarely get first priority or something like that. But actually, if we can talk about those things, it's transformational, really. I know that's, if that culture of talking there isn't, you know, as our participant said, but if it is possible to address that to feel much more welcome.
That's lovely,
really,
and thank you. We have actually, yeah, so we've got, I'll just read this quickly before we finish, because we're supposed to be an hour. We're going on slightly. No personal items allowed. Lots of staff with particular physical space needs can no longer have those supported. Yeah, you make a really good point. It's difficult. It's difficult as we move forward and everything changes. These are more stresses that are being placed on us all, aren't they, Anne?
That's exactly right. And I mean, that last question sounded sort of quite a serious one, and around an HR issue as well.
Yes.
Yes. Do come along to our day and just explore these. We'd love to hear from you.
Lovely. So thank you, Anne, for another amazing and really informative webinar. What I'm going to do is send the link to this recording to everybody, along with the links to the 2 previous Mind CBC joint webinars that we've run. One was on men's mental health and one was on sleep. And if you'd like to share those far and wide, you're very, very welcome to do so. For our next CBC Wellness Campaign events, including our menopause cafes, just search CBC Wellness Campaign on Eventbrite. We've got a lovely walk, an evening lantern walk on the campus coming up for you to look out for, among lots of other things. We're just about to start a choir on the campus as well, which should be great fun. Keep your eyes open, because all this information is going to be on our Eventbrite pages. So lovely to have seen so many of you attending again today. Thank you. And thank you again to Anne. And all that is left for me to say is goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day.